We're going to be shipping 3 different plants, 3 unique plants, to some lucky soul over in California. For whatever reason, shipping to California costs double, sometimes even triple what it costs to ship to pretty much everywhere else in the United States where I'm from. You know, I'm grateful for all the sales, even the ones in California. Honestly, I don't even care how much it cost me to ship these plants to Suzanne in California that we're going to be doing on this video today, because I'm just happy that she's going to have them. I'm happy that she's going to do something amazing with them, something magical with them. And I'm excited to be a facilitator of that. I'm excited to be the middleman and spread a little bit of planty magic around this world. Whew! Ugh, let me rest my arm over here, because dang. Nonetheless, did I do a good job describing what this video is going to be about? We're going to have fun. We're going to dig into those tubs back there. I'm going to show you a little bit of my process. I'm going to show you kind of how I'm doing everything, how everything works, how I keep everything organized. I'm going to give you a little sneak peek into just a few of those buckets, at least the ones that we're pulling the plants out of, so that we can box them up and ship them out again to a lucky person named Suzanne in California. So first things first, we're going to be heading to that bin right over there, right there. But before we get over there, let me back up and I want to capture a commemorative picture of this wall, because unfortunately folks, even though I promised on this YouTube channel that we would build that terrarium together, I bought all the things for it. I bought all of the wood that's sitting in there. I bought all the supplies that are sitting down on the ground over there. Even though I did all of that, I've become a little consumed with this Etsy shop, Tiny World Terraria. And to be honest with you, I need the space. So I've got to take this thing down. I'm not saying we'll never build it together. I'm just saying we're not going to build it quite yet. All right. So the first plant that we're going to be after is this beauty right here. This is a Japanese painted fern. I think it's called a painted crested fern or something like that. For Suzanne in California, I'm going to pick the best one. I can't tell if the best one is maybe, I think the best one might be this one right here in the middle, just because it looks the most even. But before we go pulling that Japanese crested fern out of its soily home, we've got to get a new home for actually all 3 of these plants to live in. And that's where these little cups come into play. Now I've actually just recently switched the cups, or I don't know, what do you call them, nursery pots that I'm going to be using. So I'm not even real sure why I'm showing these in the video, but I've got some new black ones on the way. I'm going to test out how that works. So one of the things that I find most important about the way that I ship plants is I use an abundant amount of sphagnum moss. So number one, that sphagnum moss down there is going to prevent any sort of drainage or anything like that coming out of those drain holes in the bottom. But number two, it's also going to prevent the dirt from falling out and all that sort of stuff. And I kind of, I can't prove this, but I almost feel like it adds to a little bit of to the humid bubble that we're creating while these plants are going to be in their shipping phase for the next 2 or 3 days. So anyway, sphagnum moss goes in the bottom of the cups first. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take my fingers and just, those claw games where you move the thing around and then drop the claw and it picks something up. That's always what I kind of imagine when I'm doing this stuff. So right now I'm sinking my claws, giving her a little shake, ready to pop right in to the pot. Now, just like I mentioned before that I like to stuff the bottom of those pots with sphagnum moss. Once I get the plant in, just like this Japanese crested fern, I like to fill in all that additional space with sphagnum moss rather than soil. It kind of depends. Sometimes I'll fill a little bit of soil in there, but most of the time what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of stuff all of these areas full of this. And the reason that I do that is, I don't know, is it branding? Do I just like sphagnum moss that much? Or do I actually believe that when I squirt this thing down afterwards that it continues to hold the humidity and, puts that little injection of magic into my shipping practices and gets the plants where they need to be on time? Who knows? Either way, that's what I do. I stick sphagnum moss to fill in all the dull areas. Then I take my fancy spritzer and I just give everything a nice little soak in. I don't want to get the leaves wet, but I want to get that whole layer of sphagnum moss. So what's next, you ask? We've got our Japanese painted crested fern all potted up nicely in its little cup over there. There is one final step, but before we get to that step, we've got to fill these two pots up with their plants. So up next is one of my favorite plants. It's always really easy to find because it's one of the few that I've got covered in a little shade cloth over here. But this one is called peacock moss, and it's one of my favorite plants because it's called peacock moss. It's not actually a moss at all. It's actually a plant. It just kind of has like a mossy like appearance to it. I'm about to plunk my little claw down into the peacock moss bucket right there, and let's pot our next little plant up for Suzanne in California. Plunk. Our second plant all loaded up. Just a nice little pot of some peacock moss beside our Japanese crested fern. Now what's left? What's last to go into this little pot over here, you ask? I'm actually a little bit jealous that Suzanne is gonna have my one of final two sensitive plants, and that's what's coming up next. Let's find the sensitive plant. But before the hunt actually begins, let me show you how I keep all of my plants organized. Just a quick little shot of my screen. At this point, I've basically just got, a simple Excel sheet that's a plant index. So I've got my common name, I've got my scientific name for each plant, and then most importantly, I've got this little ID index over here. So each one of the plants that I have in one of those buckets over there is assigned an ID number, essentially. I've got little tags that I'll show you in the buckets that are sitting beside all the plants, just so I can kind of keep everything identified and stuff like that. But that's how I know what I'm supposed to be looking for. Let's see what we got. It's not in there. No, that's button ferns. It's not that. Some artillery plants that I've got a little experiment going with. That is not it for sure. Is that it? No, that's just an empty tub that I've actually got plans for. It's not that one. It's not that one. It's not this one. This is dragon's tongue. I found it. There it is right there, sitting all alone. In fact, it was right beside the peacock moss that we just used before. I'm not going to show you this time until we can get a nice up-close version, because again, these are probably my favorite plants in my whole little tub system back here. I just love them because they're so interactive. I've talked about these sensitive plants before, but they're just like the most interactive plants in the world. I just always have this like spot in my heart for plants that sort of just take that extra little step to kind of show you that they feel things and that they're listening and that sort of stuff. So these sensitive plants specifically, get a little light in here for you. These sensitive plants will actually they'll curl up their leaves. They'll all everything will just sort of fold in at night. And then when the day comes around and they start to get some sunlight again, everything will just kind of spread open and open up, and they just sort of like bloom into these beautiful, almost like flower-like plants every day. I'm going to keep one of them for myself. I think I'm going to give the bigger and better one to Suzanne in California. We're going to do our ploop, but I'm plooping really gently this time. All right, just enough to get those roots. Give them a little shake off. Oh, and just in case I didn't mention, remember I was talking about the ID index being 31 for this sensitive plant? Well, there's my little tag that shows, it just kind of shows me what each of these plants are. And ploop. So now that we've got our plants all potted up, I've got to seal them up with just a little bit. The way that I do it is putting a little bit of packaging tape just on top of all of that that sphagnum moss. Now this part you got to be very careful because you don't want to get any tape on the plant or anything like that. But You kind of get used to doing it after a while. Once like this, it's a little bit easier. You don't have to hold them back as much, but you know, basically just go around the sides, seal all of that nice, moist, juicy sphagnum moss down into the pot there. Again, that's the necessary steps that I take to kind of create that little bubble, that little shipping bubble that these plants are going to be enjoying for the next 2, 3, sometimes even 4 days if the shipping goes a little bit haywire. So we want to do the best we can to seal everything into there, to make sure all that moisture that we sprayed into that sphagnum moss is going to be nice and you know, it's going to stay nice and juicy. It's going to stay all in place, and everything will hopefully arrive a-okay. Is that how you do a-okay? I don't know. These more like ground cover plants, they're a little bit different. What I usually like to do is just kind of get them nice and stuffed in, and then I like to cover them up with a nice big healthy plop of sphagnum moss. Sort of work that into the sides. Again, giving a nice spritz down, which, believe it or not, will help it all start sort of molding together. You know, as usual, rip off a nice big piece of tape, stick it over the top, just like that. I like to create a little bit of an X. And in the end, we've got something a little bit more like that. But that's not all, folks. We've got one, well, it's not the last, but it is a crucial step. And that, well, that of course is going to mean using craft paper like this to finish off our little bubble, to create the outer capsule of the shipping bubble that we're going for here. Okay, now we've almost got that bubble complete, but before we can actually package these things up, we've got to take each of our plants, grab a little bit more sphagnum moss, kind of just fill in some of the branches and stuff to provide a little bit of a barrier in here, a little bit of a pillow for the ride, if you will. And then the rest is pretty easy. We take it, and we give it a nice, just a nice roll. We roll it. And seal it. But we seal it much better than that because I was just trying to do it quick for the video. And I like to bend the top down like this, kind of like you're wrapping a Christmas present, but it doesn't really, it only has to last for a few days, so it doesn't really matter too much. Again, what this paper is really doing is it's just creating that barrier, that bubble that these plants are going to live in, you know, while they make their way over to their fancy new home on the West Coast in California. Isn't that where all plants want to be? I'm actually surprised at how many California orders I get, because I kind of figured that most of the plants came from California. And here's a little fun fact about the making of this video. I finished up those other 2 plants without you, so you don't even have to watch me put packaging tape on our little planty papery bubbles anymore. We're ready to stick these things in the box. We're ready to get these things packed up, tucked in, and I guess ready to make their way to their new home. Maybe we'll do the big guy in the middle. Either one of these guys on the side. That'll give them a nice little cushion on the bottom, and then I have all of this on the top. It's kind of like potting a plant, really. You just you get it in its home, you give it a little press, you know, not too hard, but also not too gentle. Just a nice way of getting everything settled in. And of course, that's not completely it. I could arrange a pickup, but I sort of enjoy putting the box in my car, driving down to the post office. Fortunately, I've got prepaid postage, so I never have to wait in the line. I just have to go up there, kind of throw it on the counter, and then it magically disappears. And the plants in their little planty bubbles in this box start making their way to wherever they're going to be. And all of that is thanks to, I don't know, who should we thank at the end of this video? The infrastructure that makes it possible to ship plants all over the place? But before I actually get these plants shipped off, I promised you at the beginning of this video that I'd give you a few more updates on the Etsy shop. So I'm going to sit down, I'm going to give my arm a rest. So in my last video, I told the entire story in much greater depth than I actually had even initially intended of telling, but the entire story of how and why I created the Etsy plant shop that you watched me box up an order for today. Now, one of the exciting things that I mentioned in that previous video was that after my first full month of having the Etsy shop online, I made $322. But the thing that's even more exciting about that is that there was actually a few days left in April, and the day after I released that last video, I got my biggest order ever. It was $130. I was so excited. I sent Amy a message telling her that she was my largest order yet and how excited I was and all that sort of stuff. And it was just, it was a nice, pleasant experience. Nonetheless, that giant order came in the last few days of last month, which was April. Now, Etsy doesn't actually pay you out right away. They wait till you actually ship the product. They wait till a little bit of time goes by in case there's going to be any sort of refunds or anything like that. And then they actually pay you out for the order. So I'm not sure if that order is going to count towards that previous month or if it's going to count towards the next month. But nonetheless, it doesn't really matter because what kind of magic was that I got my largest order ever after spilling all my beans on the whole story of how I created the Etsy shop. So I'm really grateful, even though I've got a lot left to learn, even though I don't really know much of anything about profit margins, and I'm spending almost as much as I'm selling the plants for on the actual plants, and I'm sure I'm making all sorts of other mistakes that I haven't even discovered yet. But I'm grateful for the opportunity to just kind of feel I'm grateful for the opportunity to feel the motivation to keep going and to keep growing this thing and to keep finding a way to kind of fit into this world and to be that person. And all around in my fairy bubble of a brain, it's all just rainbows and clouds, and we're all making beautiful terrariums. I remember shipping it out on Saturday, because I had to get to the post office before it closed at noon, because it closes early on the weekends. And I'd actually shipped the order out the very same day that I got it, because I just happened to be already working in the tubs, kind of spritzing everything down and doing my general maintenance when I got the order. But starting this week, every day so far, Monday, Tuesday, and today is a Wednesday, I've got an order every single day. And the coolest part about it is they just keep getting better. So my first order on Monday was one for $25. I always feel kind of bad for those smaller orders that are just like one plant, because I've got this deal going on Etsy where if you spend more than $35, you get free shipping. And generally when someone buys just one plant or something, it generally doesn't qualify for the free shipping. So the first order was $25. They had to pay for the shipping on that. So I did feel a little bit bad about that one, but nonetheless, I did connect someone with one beautiful plant. I don't even remember what it was. And then on Tuesday, I got another order for $50 some. And then today, the order that you just saw me fulfill, the order that we boxed up together, the little planty bubbles that we created in this video, I can actually give you, if I look on my screen real quick, I'll give you the exact total on that one. The order that you watched me box up today was $76.40. I've mentioned a few times that the shipping to California for some reason is always like double or triple the price. It was no exception this time. It cost me $18 to print the shipping label, but that has nothing to do with Suzanne in California. And to be honest with you, it doesn't really have a whole lot to do with me either, because all I'm really trying to do here is take plants from one place and put them where they're supposed to be.